Beijing is steadily working to conquer the final frontier, and Washington is wary.
The Pentagon says China's space program is now outpacing the U.S. with more than 60 launches in 2022.
China aims to be a world's leading space power by 2045.
China has been excluded from the International Space Station since 2011, but China hasn't been bothered at all. The reason? The Chinese have their own space station.
Now, the Tiangong is seen as an emblem of China's growing clout and confidence in its space endeavors.
The Tiangong space station is the centerpiece of Beijing's ambitious space program.
China, they are aggressive, they are good. They put up their space station, which technically is very good.
So yes, China in this way is kind of, I don't want to call them an enemy, but a frenemy. Competition stirs innovation as no other force operating.
Friends, if we lose space, we lose the banking system, we lose the power grid, we lose terrestrial wireless networks. This is an existential threat to our very nation.
Our future space race is with China. And
the Shenzhou 15-man spacecraft launch mission a complete success.
China is quickly becoming a space superpower.
8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1，点火！
China completed all 11 launches at its space station construction stage in just 20 months. China's speed, precision, and reliability to always deliver its plans has taken many by surprise.
Here's the risk that we face right now. The International Space Station is coming to the end of its life. There is a brand new Chinese space station. They call it the Chinese International Space Station, and all of the capabilities that we have helped develop for all these countries around the world might eventually go start participating with the Chinese space station. I think that would be a mistake for the United States of America to develop all of that capability and then turn it over to a country that doesn't have our best interests at heart.
The United States has stupefying resources. It's a reminder, it's a wake-up call to Americans that if you choose to not do something, that doesn't mean it won't happen in the world. Other countries that do value it will do it. And China leads the world in entangled quantum particle distances. China already has the largest telescope in the world, while ours collapsed under structural failure.
Tiangong, which represents a momentous achievement for the country's space program, is rising tensions and the stakes are high. It took 15 countries, a decade, and more than 30 missions to assemble the International Space Station, ISS.
I visited China 20 years ago as part of a government, a commission, and we visited the offices of industry leaders and political leaders. I looked at their hands, and on their ring fingers were the graduation rings from MIT here in the United States, from Caltech. So these were American-trained engineers who were Chinese, American-trained, went back to China to start implementing some of the, and bringing to bear what role innovations in science and technology would play on the future of their economy. Other countries, their best and brightest would come to the United States and stay, okay, because we had opportunities. So, yes, and so one of the most impressive things to me about China is when they say they're going to do something, they do it. Yeah, we're going to build our own space. You didn't invite us to the International Space Station. We'll build our own space station. Sure enough, there it is.
It is expected that Tiangong will outlast the aging ISS and could become the only permanent crewed outpost in orbit.
Why is the space race so important to these countries?
Well, it's a whole variety of reasons. Part of it is, of course, national prestige and pride and demonstration to the world that you have the capacity to do that kind of thing. But it's also now putting down a marker about what China is intending to be in terms of a modern, science-driven, education-driven nation state of the 21st century.
GPS or the GLONASS system only use one type of orbit, but with China use three types of orbit. It can provide very accurate services to the whole world. For any satellite navigation system, the feature is that the more satellites you have, the accuracy will be better.
Great power competition over technology is now out in the open. This extends to matters in space for both countries and is unlikely to go away anytime soon.
From suburban drivers to international shipping, to farming, to banking, to disaster response, to U.S. and allied military forces on the ground.
How important space is to our country and to our national security. Space is critical to our country. The way we communicate, the way we navigate, the way we produce food, the way we produce energy, the way we do disaster relief, the way we predict weather, national security and defense, over-the-horizon communications. Every banking transaction in this country is dependent on a timing signal from GPS. You got to regulate the flows of electricity on the power grid. It is dependent on a timing signal from GPS. We think about terrestrial wireless networks, our cell phones, dependent on a timing signal from GPS. And a lot of people don't think about that, but you know who does? All of the competitors and adversaries of the United States know that we are dependent on space. That's why they are developing capability to launch direct descent to anti-satellite missiles, co-orbital anti-satellite satellites. They're developing technology that can be rapidly proliferated, like jamming and spoofing and dazzling and hacking. The enemies of this country must understand that they will never get an advantage over us by destroying space.
The United States is no longer seen as the uncontested unipolar power in space.
China's space program essentially, how much closer is it to achieving its ambitions of being a world-leading space power within the next 2 decades?
It's already, frankly, almost there. Unfortunately, the International Space Station did exclude China. They built their own, and a spanking new and fantastic thing it is. All the experiments, the science missions on board the Chinese space station have gone through a UN mechanism, and so there's many countries have applied to put their experiments on the space station, and they've been approved, and they're in fact ready to go. So that's what I mean by international. And also there have been, I think, some French and German astronauts training with their Taikonaut colleagues for future possible joint missions on their space station, which they're very open about.
The palace in the heavens is looking forward to your arrival.
Under a tight schedule, China has successfully delivered 3 mega space station modules, 4 Shenzhou manned spacecraft, and 4 Tianzhou cargo spacecraft in an uninterrupted sequence of success, reflecting China's robust development in the domain of manned space technology.
The Shenzhou 15 mission, for example, it docked up there yesterday, and it took about just over 8 hours to dock. You know, you're docking with the International Space Station, it takes you about 16 to 18 hours, much longer. So new technologies and new capabilities and capacities that are being demonstrated by the Chinese in their burgeoning space program.
It takes about 90 minutes to complete one full orbit. Taikonauts can even see 16 sunrises a day from the station.
Once you're in space, your blood will go to your head and your tongue will swollen. So that is the immediate effect, and also you lose your appetite. And in the coming months, as they have stayed in orbit for 6 months, that would experience a lot of physical changes, including cardiovascular changes and loss of bone mass. So they need to have a constant exercise on board the station.
Interesting facts about life on the station. China's space station has 2 separate sets of kitchen equipment, enabling 2 crews to prepare their own meals at the same time, to dine together or separately. There are also 2 bathrooms and 6 sleeping booths in the Tianyi and the Wentian modules, which the 2 crews could use separately. The station also has an external robotic arm, which can support activities and experiments outside the station. The main function of the Tiangong station is to perform research on life in space. There is a particular focus on learning about the growth and development of different types of plants, animals, and microorganisms.
So in the future, for instance, making some medicine needs very quiet and very special environment which can only be realized in space. So the gene of the seeds will be changed very fast and more remarkably than that on the ground. Maybe they are more delicious or they have more potential amount.
And there are more than 1,000 experiments planned for the next 10 years. The science experiments have already begun, with a planned study involving monkey reproduction commencing in the station's biological test cabinets. Whether the monkeys will cooperate is an entirely different matter. Tiangong's high-speed communication system will allow tens of gigabytes of data to be sent to the ground every day. There is also a supercomputer on the space station to analyze the data while it is still in space. The future, China aims to keep the orbital outposts constantly occupied and operational in orbits for at least 15 years. Tiangong highlights the country's policy of self-reliance and is an important step for China towards achieving larger space ambitions among the changing landscape of power dynamics in space.
By 2025, it plans to collect asteroid samples near Earth, then a slew of targets by 2030. First to launch a mission to Mars to probe asteroids. Another goal, an unmanned exploration mission to Jupiter. It also plans to land Chinese astronauts on the moon for the very first time, all within the next decade. By 2035, it is aiming to develop and launch a 100-ton super heavy lift carrier rocket. And 5 years after, we could see a nuclear-powered space shuttle that will enable resource exploration and asteroid mining. There is also the intention to construct a space-based solar power station. And China aims to be a world's leading space power by 2045, one that can carry out large-scale explorations on planets and comets in the solar system and send astronauts to Mars.
While the US is tied to the dream of commercial space stations, but whether this space dream comes to fruition remains to be seen. In the latest geopolitical landscape, the United States government has cut funding to focus on other world geopolitical issues. If you've liked what you've seen in today's program, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching Reportify Media.